Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity of coming down to San Diego from Edmonton, Canada, which surprisingly, don't laugh, the temperatures were exactly the same as they are today in San Diego, which is amazing. Anyway, I'm here to talk about conflict of interest, and I'll tell you a little bit of story about how I got to give this talk. But I just want to introduce myself by saying that I've been an academic, clinician, researcher pretty much my entire life. And since moving to Canada from Germany approximately, it's been now 15 years ago, just became a Canadian, by the way, 3 days ago. Yes. But I did keep my German passport too. So I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of research funding throughout my career from all of the various institutions that give you research funding. But I've also received funding, speaking honoraria, and had quite close ties to the pharmaceutical industry mainly. But there's no reason to be concerned at all. Because I'm a doctor, right? So on a serious note, actually I'm very proud of this, because what I explain to people when they look at this and say, this is a big conflict of interest and stuff, I say, you know what? There's a reason why I work with all these companies and why I give them advice. There's a reason why they pay me for advice, because probably, I know something they don't. But I, truly cannot think of any serious development in medicine ever since I've been a doctor, and it's been, almost 30 years, that has not had some involvement from pharmaceutical industry. I'm a medical doctor, so I don't care so much about medical, devices and stuff. But when I think of all of the advances in medications that we've done, they've all come from pharmaceutical industry. In fact, if you have a good idea, and if you have something or a target or something, I don't see how you could ever develop that target and bring it to market if you were not working with industry. Now, industry can't do this alone. They need advice, they need help. A lot of the basic research is not happening in their labs, it's happening in academic labs, so they need to work together. Now, a lot of people don't get this, don't understand this. They think collusion. And I think that there's be a lot of people in the public who think there really needs to be a wall between industry and academia. And not just any wall. It's got to be huge. No, it's got to be huge, it's got to be beautiful. It's got to be the hugest, most beautiful wall, and it's got to be paid for by industry. Now, I'm not in that camp. And I can tell you why, because through these collaborations with industry, throughout my career, I've not only had a lot of fun, I've had a lot of insight into things that I might not have otherwise had, and I've had a lot of very, very interesting experiences and been able to do a lot of science that I could otherwise not have done. Let me give you a couple of examples. This was a study I was involved in. It's still today the largest randomized clinical trial on an anti-obesity medication that's ever been conducted. This was 400 centers, 16 countries, 10,000 people, randomized, controlled, double-blind, 5 years. Huge drug. Abbott was the sponsor of the trial, cost them about $200 million. This one trial. I was on the steering committee, so you can imagine this was reading protocols, I was visiting all the countries, talking to the investigators, all of that. Well, we did publish the results, and here's the results. The results were that this drug, unfortunately, although it did help people lose weight, increased the incidence of non-cardiovascular endpoints, not deaths, but complications, by 16%. So anybody who tells you that, pharma trials all tend to be positive, no, they're not. This is a negative example, which led, by the way, to the withdrawal of this compound, sibutramine, from every country that it was launched in, and this was about 70 countries where this drug was available. And after the publication of the trial, Abbott took the drug off all 70 countries. And now that might have been the end of the story. Fact is that after the trial was done and the drug came off the market, we continued looking at the data because all of us, the investigators on this trial, had full access to the data. In fact, I have the data sitting from the 10,000 people, on my computer. And we have continued putting out secondary publications, looking at a wide variety of things. But this is a very unique data set, as you would imagine. You've got this randomized controlled trial in 10,000 people before and after weight loss. And we've looked at a lot of different things. We've looked at weight loss, we've looked at anemia, uric acid, bilirubin, we've looked at blood pressure, heart rate, and we're continuing to look at this data, none of which would have been possible without, somebody spending $200 million to do the study. There's no drug company involvement in any of the data analyses now. They don't really care anymore. They've moved on. Good for them. Here's just one example of the kind of study that came out, or data that came out. So when we looked at, for example, what happens, now some of you might not know this. We don't actually know whether losing weight saves lives. We think it does, but there's actually no intervention data that actually proves this. But we thought we could look at this using some of this data. And so what this essentially tells you is that yes, if you lose weight, especially if you're in a high-risk group, you are reducing your risk. Now that's an interesting analysis. Would not have happened without us having full access to the data and the study being happened. Let me give you another example. Here's the INTERHEART study. I don't know if anybody's heard about it. This was a large study, 27,000 people, randomized, 52 countries, basically case control. Guy walks into the emergency room, he's got a stroke or a heart attack. In this case, it was a heart attack. There's also an interstroke. By the way, this was a heart attack. You pick a matched control and you look at them, and you look at risk factors. So now, interestingly, in this study, one of the things we found, I don't want to dwell on this, is the fact that it's not BMI that matters, it's where the fat is located, right? It's a little bit like real estate. What matters in obesity is not the amount of fat, it's location, location, location. So basically what this shows you is at every level of BMI is the people who have large or high waist to hip ratios who are the guys who are in trouble. Okay, great. Now you would not think that there was any kind of pharmaceutical interest in this. Now it turns out that what people may not know is that this study was actually sponsored by all of these companies. Don't ask me why they paid the money. But this is a large study, an important study that would never have gotten done without support from industry. Let me give you another example. Here's the largest study that actually looked at urinary dietary or urinary sodium excretion and potassium excretion relates to hard cardiovascular endpoints. In fact, this study looked at data from a clinical trial, from two clinical trials. One was On Target, the other was Transcend, both together involving almost 30,000 people. Again, a global study. Now, incidentally, the study shows no relationship with sodium excretion as a surrogate for sodium intake, surprising, but a pretty strong relationship with potassium intake. Interesting. Again, this is a study. These two studies were sponsored by Boehringer Ingelheim. Again, in industry, you would never have answered this question or have had this data without this kind of collaboration. Let me give you one final example. This is a smaller study. We did, again, a study funded by Boehringer Ingelheim, randomized controlled setting. People were exposed to very standardized diets. The study actually never showed the result that the sponsor might have wished for, that telmisartan, in this case the drug, would have any kind of benefit, did not. Lots of spin-offs from this study too. Here's a study that came out of that study, or a paper that came out of that study. Glycemic index predicts individual glucose response after self-selected breakfast, and we were able to study this and a whole bunch of other questions because we were doing this trial. So that's a bunch of studies I've been involved in throughout my career, and I could go on forever. I don't have the time. I'll probably also bore you to tears. The reason I'm here today is because of this little article here that I wrote on my blog. So I write this blog on obesity, and I've been doing this for the last 7 years. I pretty much write something about obesity every day. And I put up this little article here where I said, and this happened for a reason. This happened because on this day, I was trying to submit 3 papers to journals, and I wasn't getting the work done because I had all these forms to fill out. And that was really irritating. And I was started thinking about, and all they were asking me, well, what about relationship to industry? And I said, well, I've got all this industry, but you're not asking me the real questions. So I put up this little blog post here, and then everybody responded. I got tons of emails, lots of comments, and in the end I got the invitation to give this talk, which made me actually seriously think. So I was just venting here. But getting this invitation, I had to actually seriously think about this issue and say, hey, listen, I'm not a social scientist, I don't research this stuff. What do I think about it? Here's what I think about it. I think when you look at conflict, there's always 3 things here. There's someone or something that has an interest in something. Then that kind of drives an agenda. And the agenda may or may not affect the integrity of what you're doing. That's basically how conflict works. And there's question marks everywhere because you'll get why. Now, where things are very easy is when you look at commercial industry, commercial conflict, because this is straightforward. You know, you got industry. What is industry's agenda? They want to sell more stuff. What's their, you know, where's the danger? You know, why do we worry about integrity of the research that comes out of that? Well, because, you know, they may want to make their stuff look better than it is. Easy. Maker of drug X, they want to sell more drug X, so they do a study, and, you know, if the study shows that their stuff is better than, you know, drug Y, that's good for them. Great. So you got to look very carefully when you have this kind of research data that you're looking at. You got some nutritional supplement guy. They want to sell more supplements, so they do some studies. You know, very often it'll be some mouse study, 6 mice. You know, works great. Let's spin that, sell more of our stuff. So you want to look very carefully at, you know, the study design and look at the why. Because you suspect that there's going to be a conflict. Because you look at who's sponsoring the study, so right away you think, okay, let's look at the stuff carefully. Somebody makes pop, they don't want to pay taxes, maybe they funnel money to something that, you know, points to somewhere else. Who knows? Maybe you own a patent. Maybe you want to start, your agenda is you want to start a company, so what do? You do a bunch of research studies that support your patent. Great, whatever that is. Maybe your commercial interest is that you want to make money selling books. You want to write a bestseller. And we know a lot of famous scientists who, you know, very lucrative. So you need to find a publisher. Well, it helps if you actually develop a storyline. You might want to do the kind of research that supports your story. This is all very straightforward. This is commercial interest. Simple, follow the money. Easy. Here's where things get complicated. And you can almost guess where I'm going. Well, we all have to make a living. Which means we all have an agenda, and our agenda is to advance our careers. You start at the bottom, you work your way up. Which means you want to get promoted. Okay. That's a conflict. That's a big conflict. We all have that conflict. You want to get tenure, you got to get more grants and papers. What you're going to do, you're going to oversell your research question, make your question seem way more important than it is, and I do this on every grant I write, and you have to. And you want to get your stuff into some good journal, so you got to spin the results, right? You make them, you know, whatever it is. Hopefully the reviewers, you know, will sniff a rat and they'll correct things before it gets to publication, but sometimes they don't, and then it gets through, and then, well, you know, you're lucky. You won the lottery. I think we're all guilty of that, more or less. Okay? Explicit or implicit. Or you just want to be a thought leader. This is after you've become the tenured professor, right? There's nowhere else to go, so now what do? You know, you want to become the thought leader in your field, so you need publicity, you want to write book contracts, you want speaking fees. What you're going to do, best thing you can come up with is come up with a simple solution to a complex problem. People love this stuff, right? Gets you on talk. Don't make it, you know, some people do the opposite. They try to come with complex solutions to simple problems. Doesn't sell as well. Okay? So, you know, but that's a conflict, right? I mean, why are you doing this? And if your research points in that direction, well, good, that's what you want, right? Here's where it gets really complicated. Career conflict, I understand. Maybe that's, you know, simple. Here's where things get really complicated. And this is when your conflict is your opinion or your belief. And I call that an ideological concept. This is, now your agenda is to convince people of that concept, of that belief, or, you know, spread the opinion. And funnily enough, your research all points in that direction, supports this ideology. Now, what am I talking about when I mean ideology? You know, this could be very personal. This could be the fact that you've lost a parent to cancer. And then maybe that was a cancer that was missed in some kind of a screening, or your parent didn't go, whatever. So your agenda now is to promote cancer screening. So despite all the evidence showing that, well, you know, screening for cancer may not actually be the most cost-effective thing, doesn't matter. But you firmly believe in this because it maybe could have saved your parent. Your research is now all going to point to the benefits of early cancer detection. That's a bias. And that might be wrong. But how do I know? Because I didn't see, you know, mom died of breast cancer on your conflict of interest declaration. I didn't see that. Maybe you're a lifelong sports enthusiast. Most important thing, you know, sports is medicine. Exercise can solve all problems in the world. So funnily enough, you know, your papers tend to oversell the health benefits of exercise. We're not going to mention any complications that might happen from taking part in that competitive action because that's not your agenda. That's not what you believe in. But I don't know that of you because nowhere on your conflict of interest form have you declared that. Maybe you're a big believer in social determinants of health. We all are. Maybe you want government intervention. Many of us do. Well, then maybe it will help if the research that you put out there actually does point towards the potential benefit of population interventions, whether that is taxation or banning or whatever the policy is that you want to do. You know, maybe funnily enough, a lot of your research points in that direction. Maybe it's not so, you don't believe that. Right? You're a sort of, card-holding member of the Libertarian Society and you believe obesity is a choice. Individual responsibility. That's your agenda. And that's what you want to prove. And funnily enough, all of your science, kind of supports the idea that, while shame and, blame approaches, incentivizing weight loss, getting people to get their act together, pointing fingers, maybe that actually does help people lose weight. I can tell you it doesn't, but hey, maybe that's what your research shows. Or maybe you're a medical doctor like myself. And maybe like the American Medical Association, the Canadian Medical Association, you believe that, obesity is a chronic disease. Now suddenly your agenda is now to promote the medical model of obesity. And certainly all the stuff that you do in your research is pointing towards the benefits of medication and surgery and looking at obesity as a chronic disease. But that's your agenda. That's what you want to do. Now I don't know that because you haven't declared that conflict anywhere. So when we look at the nature of conflicts, here's what I basically think we end up with. People have all kinds of interests. They can be commercial, they can be ideological, they can be career, they could be a whole bunch of things that we don't know about. Because I can't even get you to declare all of them. I can ask you, well, who have you taken money for? But that's just one piece of the conflict, and that might not even be the most important conflict. Because maybe your conflict is your career or your bestseller or what else. I don't know what your agenda is. I don't know what anybody's agenda is. I don't even know what the agenda was of the guys who funded the INTERHEART study. Why would they fund that? Who knows? No way to find out. I can guess, but I don't know. So what that leaves us with is that the only thing we can actually look at is the integrity of the science and the rigor of the science. That's the only piece of evidence that at the end of the day is there. And that's what I need to look at. So I don't think that the funding source or looking at the funding source or knowing about the funding source is actually helping us in this discussion. And I know the public wants to hear about it. They want the wall. Great. They want the huge wall. But whatever. It's not really helping. I don't think that declarations of that nature solve the problem. They could be part of it, and I'm sure we'll hear that from other speakers. I think what ultimately matters is the quality of the research itself. Is the question important? Does the study design address the question? Was the study well performed? Did you do the proper statistical analysis? We've got David, he's going to be talking about that. And were the right conclusions drawn with whatever spin there always is? Those are the only questions you can ultimately ask. I don't know what the agenda is. I don't know who paid for it. I don't know what the interest is. The science has to live up to the expectation. My personal conflict, do relevant science, get funded, do good science. Now here's my one thing about working with industry, and I can tell you this, that when you look at this list of companies, they're all competitors. They're all in the same space. They all want the same thing. The best thing you can do actually to rule out conflict of interest is work with everybody. Because you can't be taking sides here. Right? And to be of any use to them at all, you have to maintain your integrity. Right? So this is actually a pretty good guarantee that you don't fall off. So there we go. So when you do stand up and criticize science, make sure you're aiming for the target, which is the actual paper and the actual science. Stop shooting at the poor fellow who's just holding up the sign, okay? Thank you so much, and if you want to read my blog, it's up there. Thank you.